right, gang, I'm back. Sorry, excuse my outburst of pure mower anger. There is just one thing in this world that pisses me off more than anything, and that is squeaky, rattly, riding lawnmowers. It just drives me nuts, even with the earmuffs on. So what we're gonna do today, we're gonna talk through why your riding lawnmower might be squeaky and rattly. And this one in particular obviously has itself a rattle slash squeak. It's an interesting rattly squeak. So first thing you do when you've got a rattly squeak, you've got to figure out, is it coming from the drive system or is it coming from your mower blades down here? Now the mower blades is driven on its own belt. The drive system is driven on its own belt. So the easiest way to figure it out is it squeaky and rattly when you pull the blade switch on, and then does it start squeaky and rattly? That means it's coming from your blades. Or is it just squeaky rattly when you're driving back and forth, which this one is doing. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna pull this sucker into Mower Mike's garage. We're gonna strip her down and we're gonna look at all these squeaky rattly possibilities to make sure that you can find out why your mower is being a squeaky rattly pain in the ear. As you see, we got squeaky pulled into the garage. And the first thing I'm gonna do, we're gonna go through the cutting system to look for any squeaks, rattles, and whatnot. Now, I am going to remove the deck because that's gonna make it a lot easier to show you all the different potential squeak points to look for. You can do this with it on the lawnmower, but it's just a lot easier to do it with the deck removed. If you wanna remove the deck and install the deck, I've got some great videos on Cub Cadet, John Deere. I'll list them down below in the video description. And you can go through those. I'm not gonna show that to you and bore you. So I'm gonna get this deck over here to my table and we're gonna go through it in detail. All right, so we've got a great view of the deck pulled off the lawnmower up here on my table. And we're going to show you where to look for your squeaks and rattles on a deck. So this applies to when you turn on the blades, you hear that tunk, 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 or screaming or a rattle. So the first thing I like to check is the idler pulleys. Now, depending on your lawnmower, you get a different number of idler pulleys, but they're essentially these pulleys that have the belt going around them. And then you've got your spindles here. So when you look at the idler pulley, your first check can be just to feel it. Feel if you feel any rough spots or any squeaks. A lot of times these get rusty and they've got bearings in here that get worn out. Now, some of them you might have a belt guard that doesn't let you turn them so easily. So what I like to do, we can just go ahead and yank this dude off. The Cub Cadets have a 1/2-inch bolt, and these are actually threaded to the mount. On your John Deere's, you're gonna have to get a wrench underneath there, but let me go ahead and let's see. So they're all gonna have these little things here. These are just to keep the belts in line, so just try not to lose them. All right, so we take it off. We've got your idler pulley right here. Look at that. And then you can always just spin it. You know, how does that feel? How does it feel? It should spin easily with no noise. And you can hear this one is really good, really smooth. And you should be good to go. And remember, when you reinstall them, there should be a little washer or lifter, whatchamacallit right there. And you go ahead and throw it back on there, like so. Make sure to get the belt around it before you reinstall. Slide it through, thread it in there, and make sure to put your belt holder in the hole it came from. Then just crank them on down. Now these are super cheap to buy on Amazon or at your local hardware store. Just make sure if you have to buy a new one, it's easier really just to buy the whole thing. So you'll buy a pulley and you'll have an ID and an ND. Your ID is going to be the outside diameter of your actual pulley itself, and then you've got the inside diameter, which should be the inside of that hole there. All right, so that is your idler pulley. So make sure they're good to go. If those are good, then let's move on to the spindles, the big guys. So the spindle is what runs your actual blades underneath. So each one of these has a bearing in it, and it runs off the mower blade belt. And as the belt turns, it turns this, and underneath here, it turns the blades. And again, these are really easy, especially when you have them off the mower, just to turn them and feel if there's any resistance. And you see this one here, there's no resistance, it feels real smooth. You shouldn't feel any rough spots or hear any cracking. If you turn this and it's like, and you've got to put pressure into it, that means you've got a problem in there and you need to put a new spindle on or a new bearing, which is fairly easy. Now on this one here, being a Cub Cadet, you undo the bolts from the underside. If this was a John Deere, you would have to pop this bolt off, these screws, and it'll pop out. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you real quick how to take it off. To do that, I'm gonna have to flip this heavy son of a bitch upside down, and we'll show you, so stay with me here. All right, so I'm gonna show you a super quick method on how to get the spindle out if you wanna replace it. Again, you can find these spindles for like 30 bucks on Amazon, super cheap. So the first thing, this being a Cub Cadet, you have to take off the blade because you can't just drop it through there because it'll hit that bottom. So I like to go ahead and just take my impact, 15/16. Real easy. Now I've got a lot of videos on taking off blades online, a lot of different ways, but you can see, it comes right off. Next, we've got 4 bolts here. These are all, let's see, 1/2-inch bolts. Now, one thing you'll notice, you gotta take them all off. They're usually extremely tight. And on these 1/2-inch bolts, I have learned my lesson the hard way. They are very brittle, and a lot of times they'll break because they're rusty. So I do not use power tools on spindle bolts. Yes, I know, that's against everything I believe in, full power. But I do not want to spend another $30 on this spindle because these spindles are made out of, it's like a pot metal. It's real cheap metal. And you'll notice these little brackets on the spindle or the bolt itself have a tendency to break on you, and it gets super, super annoying. So again, you just take off these four bolts here, and on the old cover, boom, she is off. And just to prove I am correct, let's see if I can do this on camera. Hey, whoa, and there she is. Come on. Wow, that thing's heavy. All right, and there is your spindle. As you can see, this one is in great shape. The way they're set up, they've got a bearing here, bearing here. There are rebuild kits for them, but typically I'll just buy a new one. So all right, that is everything on your deck. Remember, go through all your pulleys on top of your deck and then go through your spindles. It's really not that complex, but you know, if it's still on the lawnmower, it can be a little difficult to get a feel for them. But most likely, if your lawnmower is really being loud, you can just feel it just with your hand. So with that, we're gonna move over to the Cub Cadet drive system and have some more fun. Yes, good puppy. Belly rub, belly rub. My dog is so well trained. What I was trying to do was to get some belly rub practice in for our next step, because now that we are experts on the old deck, we need to get underneath the belly of this Cub Cadet and look at all the different pulleys that drive that drive system so we can figure out what is making the racket and what's slowing us down. So now you can crawl underneath this, especially when you have the deck off, and check them by hand. But for cinematography purposes, I think that's the right word, we're gonna go ahead and crank her up. I got my Warren pulls off and give you guys All right, so we have got a great backlit shot underneath this Cub Cadet pig. Now, before you get started looking at driveline pulleys and noise and issues, make sure to put your parking brake on, because what that does, that disengages this belt, so it's gonna make this belt loose. You crank the parking brake on, it pulls this, tightens up that spring, and that way we can test the various pulleys underneath here. Now from a high-level view, what is going on? The engine's turning up here. The engine's turning a pulley on the crankshaft, turns this, turns the belt, which goes through all these different pulleys to line it up and put tension on the pulley. And then its main job is to turn the transmission. There's a pulley on top of the transmission. Now, sometimes when your mower is making a lot of racket and it's not moving, that could mean a couple things. Could mean your belt is loose. One of these springs might be loose. You could have a worn out or broken belt, which I've got a great video on, I'll post below. Or your pulley on top of the transmission could be stripped, where it's turning that pulley, but it is not turning the shaft coming out of the transmission. And there's tons of videos online about that. We're not gonna go into that. We're gonna keep it simple here. Now, 90% of the time, what happens when you just got an annoying noise when you're putting in forward or reverse, one of these pulleys is getting worn out. So one of these 3 right here, John Deere's got a very similar situation. So the best thing to do, you can turn them. You can hear, you're listening for something creaky, kind of, where it just doesn't feel right. Whoa, that one's making some noise, and this one's making some noise. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna crank these 2 pulleys off. All it is a 1/2 inch. So, old DeWalt brushless makes quick work of these cars. So let's listen to them here. That one's not sounding good. It sounds like a, let's see this one. That one sounded all right. So I'm gonna go ahead and reinstall this one. And these are the same type of pulleys. They're just one bolt on here and they're threaded into the bottom. So you can just install. But for this one, I don't like the sound of this one. I think this is where you can see it's a little loose. Right there, the bearing is just getting worn out. So what I've got a new one here, got it super cheap on Amazon. I'll put a link below. And it's just easy. Just throw a new pulley on, make sure to put the belt on the same side you took it off. And as long as you've got that sucker, you know, with the belt going the right direction on the pulley, there you go. And I think this is gonna solve all of my issues with the noise, because it's just the little bit of bearing noise. Sometimes they can just get dried out, worn out, and start making a racket. So I'm gonna go ahead and let this sucker down and we're gonna test her out and see if that fixed it. Well, I hope that helped you figure out what that noise is on your lawnmower. Now, on this lawnmower specifically, it did not fix it. I come to find out this is an engine noise. I got some larger problems going than an $8 bearing. It was spewing fuel out the exhaust, filled my whole shop full of smoke, so we got some bigger fish to fry. But typically, when there's noise, it's one of those pulleys or a spindle. So, they're not all winners, folks. So stay with me, and we'll catch them next time. Maybe we'll figure out why I just dumped a gallon of gas out my exhaust pipe. Never seen that one before. Mower Mike out.